Time Was Not My Burden. And we want to encourage at the beginning of the show for all of our listeners and all of our guests that they need to get this book. And we're sure Dunn will be telling you how to get this book. However, in the process, we all right then. I see Brother Barry has his copy. I really would appreciate if our guests would introduce themselves prior to Dunn getting started and tell us a little bit about who you are. And Dunn, if we can defer to our guest and then come back to you, will that be okay?
Please do. Thank you.
Okay. Barry has been here a while, and obviously we'd like to start with him. And Mr. Stevens, would you mind sharing with us a little bit, and we'll keep it moving from there.
My name is Barry Stevens. I am president of the Northeast Louisiana Arts Council. We're based in West Monroe, Louisiana, same hometown of Don's, and gotten to know him over the last few years and have really found it to be a blessing.
Well, thank you so very much. Also, I see we have here Mary Kilgore, and we have Felicia, and we have Dr. Carol Townsend. Felicia, being an offspring of Dunn's.
That's all. That's it. That's all.
Will you talk to us a little bit, please?
There's not much to tell. I'm the oldest.
Okay.
There's nothing really to tell.
All right, we appreciate that. Ms. Kilgore, if you would share with us briefly who you are and the connection to Dunn.
All right, good evening. I'm Mary Kilgore, Mary Wilkes, and I'm on with my mother, Betty Wilkes, and my daughter, Madeline, is in the background. Reverend Wills is a former pastor of ours, and I like to call him my mentor, and we're just glad to be on. I've been sharing with him how my daughter, who is 11, she loves art. So as soon as I picked up this book from Reverend Wheels, we've got our copies right here. She's been reading every time we go somewhere. So I'm waiting to get a chance to snag it and start reading myself. So good evening to everyone. We're glad to be here.
Fantastic. We're glad that you're here. And I see Dr. Carol Townsend. She may have stepped away, but Dr. Townsend, if you're there, if you would just share with us briefly.
Good evening, everyone. I am still here, but I will remain with my video off. I am thrilled and excited to be here with Ms. Wilkes said. I know you all call him Dunn Sinconi, but we know him as our beloved Reverend Wills in the CME Church. But I do say that I here represent our family, the Townsend family here in Arcadia. Reverend Wills has been our longtime family friend. We're glad to support him. And we too have our books, my twin sister Cheryl and I, and we are delving into the reading and excited about it. So everyone, thank you and have a good evening.
Fantastic. We appreciate that. As we have other guests, Doc, they're not on with us live. They're on my screen, and I see some new ones popping on. So just before you get started, if you will allow me just to share with them again, is that we have the legendary Dunn Sinconi. He's the co-author of Just an Ordinary George, 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Your Denial is Your Conscience. He's a world-renowned artist. And for all of the paintings and drawings that you see behind me comes from the movie classic, The Art of Love. And you may recognize James Garner in this picture behind me, but there's also Dick Van Dyke, Elke Summer, and Angie Dickinson, among others. So we just wanted to bring our new audience in and just let you guys know that you're in for a treat. And Dunn will be talking with you about his latest book. And this book is titled Time Was Not My Burden, and we know that you guys will be getting a copy. So without further ado, Dunn Sinconi, if you will, sir. I know generically there's a lot that we can talk about, and we're just going to address a few things. But if you would just kind of give us an insight as to what got you revved up about writing Time Is Not My Burden.
Oh, Time Is Not My Burden became the name of the memoir that I initiated about 12 to 13 years ago. And I wanted to write many of the things that had happened in my life from childhood throughout my life. And that was how the book had its start. Once I began to write, I began also to realize that there were many other things that were happening simultaneously across my lifespan. And those things, whereas when I was a child, I did not realize how they were impacting me. I wanted then to somehow bring that kind of historic things that were happening around me, like World War II, the Great Depression, and the Civil Rights time, and many, many other things that happened during that same time that I was making my way in the early parts of my life. So that is where the book moved to as I went forward in trying to bring it together.
Fantastic. Now, you introduced us, well, let me put it this way. You introduced me to a new word. And on page 19 of this memoir, you mention a word, nyctalopia. Will you talk to my audience is I see some thumbs going up. I don't they may know what that word means, and I told you initially you improved my vocabulary just with that word. Will you share with us a little bit about what inspired you to write that there?
Well, nyctalopia is really night blindness. That's the
Okay.
common term for it. And I probably was born with night blindness. That's a condition of the retinas of my eyes. And because I'm night blind, that created a dynamic in my life growing up with my cousins and uncles and aunts and other persons that I had involvement with in play and work and all that kind of thing, and just living from day to day that they didn't have. And I had no understanding of why that condition was mine. I never worried about it. I did try early on to somehow overcome it. And little by little, as I grew older, I began to cope with it. And other sensories within my physical being and possibly even in my psychic began to heighten beyond what they had been. I don't know if other people are sensitive when something living gets close to them. I am. I don't have to see it, and that works day and night. So it's very advantageous to me now in that context. But that impacted me in everything that I've done in my life. And at the same time, whereas there were times when I was in situations and could not see in that darkness, there was always a way out for me, a person, a condition that enabled me to get past that moment. So it's part of my life.
Well, and that's very powerful, Doc. As I shared with you, I have quite a few young listeners, and I wanted them to hear that particular piece as they and their parents purchase this book, because there are so many times people place limitations on themselves, and you did not allow that to stop you. You're a world-renowned artist, and heck, I used to have 20/20, and I still couldn't paint nor draw. So when you're dealing with situations, I just think people really need to know now as we move forward. I don't know if and you and I didn't discuss this on purpose, because as I told you on my shows, I like our audience and our guests to just have free reign and to take care what they feel is important. If you have a certain passage you'd like to read at the beginning, please share it with us, and we're engaging our audience, and there are some other things that we'll be asking. But if you have certain passages you'd like to touch upon, please do so.
I sometimes read from the beginning of the book and the chapter, actually in the introduction of the book. And I'm going to ask you, Brother Lars, if you will go to the introduction of the book.
Okay.
And read the first 4 paragraphs in the introduction, then skip all the way to the end and read the last 3 of that one. Then we'll move wherever else you want to go.
Okay, so the first 4 paragraphs?
Yes.
Okay, when I was a toddler, illogical knowns and unknowns wholly encircled my reasoning. For example, not remembering when I could not draw, yet never having heard the word art. Still, art was what I desired to make. Apart from having no awareness, in order for me to make art in America compelled me into snares of racial hate. Falsely, my oppressors held hostile, conflicting views of me. Because I was of African lineage, my persecutors maintained I was less than human, arguing I was inferior to their European leagues. The length and breadth of the lie led my passion inspired. I strove against the debasing lie. God's gift actuated in me. In the very presence of the tyrant's unreasonable burdens, art overflowed my logical, toddler-like reasoning. Though the lie determined many of my boundaries, God disallowed racism to define me. Racial tempest gales assaulted both my African and indigenous American ancestors in North America in 1492. The 1492 date brings to mind Christopher Columbus's first arrival in the Caribbean islands. Not as broadly associated with Columbus's navigator attributes was the evil brand of racial hate he initiated in America, specifically his hostility for the humanity of indigenous Americans and the African slaves who voyaged to North America, landing at Fort Monroe near Jamestown, Virginia on August 20th, 1619. Certain British colonists traded food to a destitute British ship captain and crew in exchange for 20 African men and women slaves. They were the first Americans to be forced into slavery in North America. Their fates were irrevocably settled. Africans forcibly brought to or offsprings born in North America were considered chattel, legally owned property. At purchase, Africans were listed with livestock, farm tools, household goods, etc. That single dehumanizing act set the course for the life of African slaves. They had only one exit: death. Common crisis unites even enemies for a season. African slaves from opposing tribes united against their common crisis, which was slavery. Their descendants living in North America grew reciprocal, looking out for each other, come what may, until this day. Enslavement of Africans rooted deep among the British colonists, during which time King George III sowed seeds of agitation against rising winds of colonial revolution. Whirlwinds reaped sheaves of patriots warring against the crown. In 1783, the revolting American colonists prevailed over Great Britain. In the ethical and moral sense, what importance did the American farmers give to the inhumane acts of enslaving Africans? How significantly was the day August 20th, 1619 held in their conscience? In spite of their sentiments, con or pro, August 20th, 1619 became the measuring chain for the fledgling American Republic's state of unity.
Yeah, before we go to that next area, the big question that comes to mind perhaps in the reader, and I don't really know this, but why did I begin the writing in this way? That world is the world that I was born into unknowingly at the time and grew up in unknowingly, that was the kind of world that I was a part of. That became as much a weight in my life as night blindness. It was just as present as night blindness was to me. Metaphorically, they come together, because not being able to see, to navigate your way in the environment that you're in, and not having understanding of why that cross is upon you. The opposite of the two is, one was a physical condition that I had no control over, and none of my immediate parents or relatives brought that into my life. The other is just the opposite. That was brought into my life intentionally, and my relatives and parents worked with me the same as they worked with me to overcome the night blindness. They worked with me to face up to the conditions of racism that we all were carrying that cross and still are.
Wow, that's a powerful piece. I began to question why there were times I did not succeed, especially when I had put so much effort into what I tried to do. Did my shortcomings have meaningful purpose? Did failure really exist? Was I using my weakness to get me by? Wrestling against self-inflicted disappointments, I tried not to fail at anything I did. Even so, faults remained part of me. As a toddler and early into adulthood, I was aware that my drawings exposed my inability to draw as accurately as I wished, but I was not conscious that my drawings also revealed flaws in my character. I suppose the uneasiness I felt reviewing my drawing was due to not paying close attention. Countless drawings later, I began to realize the causes for many of my drawing shortcomings. It was found that all of my flaws did not stem from my inability to draw or attention deficiencies. Reasoned responses reveal that removing visible flaws do not change bad habits or known wrongdoings. Despite the commonly held belief that erasures on pencils may be used to correct mistakes, erasers may only be used to keep our papers clean. But mistakes are not erasable. Some few may be amended. In the main, all others must be confessed, then forgiven. Querying my soul to disclose this divine law, I discerned the purpose for failure. Failure teaches us how not. Failure asks the same two questions of me. First teaches us how not. Failure asks the same two questions of me. First, will I pay attention here, learn and trust God? And second, will I change and then embrace awakening to light and truth? My life story has been lived uncovering my own faults in the midst of America's unrighteousness. Fires beneath America's crucible had burned red hot 370 years at my birth in 1936. In my duration of decades struggling to live in America, I have witnessed significant changes. I have seen America in some of her greatest hours. We, the people, we truly won. Her worst hours I also am acquainted with. We, the people, we forced to become predisposed to associate with members of the same race. The fires of the common crisis of my enslaved ancestors are no longer, but the embers are still aglow in 2020. Daily, I live withstanding this languishing angry climate. More than half of life, I have lived with my loving, beautiful wife, Catherine, and five intelligent, energetic, challenging children. We've lived in family, hoping against hope, withstanding face to face race hatred. By God's grace, equipping fortitude through the Holy Spirit has tempered my anger and changed my thinking. Now I face internal and external dejections by while thanking God. And art transcends time, considering this. I have come to believe there has always been more good-willed than ill-willed people living in America. I have grown aware that justice may not happen in an instant, a year, or decades, yet Lady Justice will lever her scale time was not my burden.
That's where we move to that latter part of this, because dealing with the problems of mistakes and trying to do things like I was told to do them in school, at home, and everywhere else, it became a personal problem. And I suspect that that's everybody's personal problem. And how to overcome that did not come in a flash. It came over a long period of time where I had to learn these things. And as I learned them, then I was better able to live my life and try to help other people live their lives better as well.
Now, I also want to invite our guest, if you want to ask Don any questions relative to what he's speaking on right now, please feel free to do so. If you have questions later on, then feel free to share those, ask those as well. If you want to ask
Melvin, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Yes, I
This
can.
is Mayor Danny Smith from Marion. I'm
How you
just
doing, Mayor
joining the
Danny Smith?
podcast, so just
Hello, Mayor.
I'm just doing great.
Fantastic. We're
Hello
happy
there,
that you're
Mr.
here.
Don Cinconi. Well, I am too, and thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Okay, Don, would you like to?
You're welcome.
Thank you. Don, would you like to go to another area? Would you like? I have some other things here we can talk about as well. I just want to ask you about some things, but our guest may want to jump in there.
Go ahead, where you are looking forward to going.
Well, I didn't want to get ahead of you because I was excited about what I was reading, and I did see on page 32. In your second paragraph, you talk about, you say, Ethel and I were treading over sacred plowed grounds. Chattel had walked there long before Ethel and me. Some were on 4 hoof feet, some were on 2 bare, shackled feet. The main turn row probably had been made by whip-scared plowmen, turning mule teams and plowing endlessly from boyhood unto death. That caught me particularly heavy, Don, and I just would like you to share with me if you were thinking what I was thinking when I read that.
Well, I won't know until you tell me what you were thinking.
You got me. You made me say it. I didn't want to say it earlier, but
Yeah.
what I was thinking when I saw that, I saw in my mind's eye from reading the inception, from things you shared with me before. I was visualizing those individuals that were sharecroppers, that were forced to do the plowing and to make the rows and that type of thing. In my mind also, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself when I share this, but I was thinking about this at that time. My mind also went to when I was a boy, and I would see people in my neighborhood would get on what they used to call the cotton truck. And when I was a boy, I didn't really understand what they were talking about when they were talking about the cotton truck. Until I got a little older, and I started to, then I understood that this gentleman, Mr. Charlie, was the guy of the cotton truck, and he was taking them to either pick cotton or plow cotton. So I was just wondering, as you were talking about being a boy, and you talked about this and you described it so well, I was just wondering where your head was when you were writing about that.
That lone paragraph undergirds the whole of the book. And the thing that I'm wrestling with initially writing this is, I'm writing from the mind of the little boy, but these things that I'm actually speaking of I knew some of what that was about because of my upbringing with my grandparents and my great-grandparents. And my great-grandparents, Mose Hendricks and Ellen Starr Hendricks, had come out of Alabama into Louisiana and purchased 88 acres of land. And so much of my life was spent on that land, though my parents were sharecroppers at this particular time. So I'm aware of that, but as a child, I would not have been able to deal with the kind of verbiage that I'm dealing with here. My world comes in to this in description of that turn row and the scene as we walk along that turn row. Vividly in my mind, my mother's sunflowers having blossomed beautifully in the springtime and across the summer. Now autumn and winter had set in, so the petals were yet hanging on to that big round circle, and head bent down, no longer following the arc of the sun. The birds were so numerous then, all around us, all kinds of birds. And I was particularly attracted to them. So as we walk through here on this turn row, this is just a dirt mound. That's where it really was created as the plows turned around, and probably somebody started to going across the ends of that road, those roads, and that created that way through that large plantation we were on. I think of it at that time, I thought of it probably as a square mile, but it was actually larger than that. There were several families that were sharecroppers living on that plot at the time. So it was a familiar way for me to move forward. So what I'm thinking there does dovetail with where you are going with it, but it's also still undergirding where this book has to go.
Thank you. Audience, feel free anytime to just jump right in and ask questions or share. And because we certainly want you to engage. We're done tonight, and we won't keep done all night. We're just going to ask you a few more things. We know I have my new audience. I'm looking on my screen here. I know none of you have the book because we have not shared that with you. So we want you to hear a little bit about this, so that you will be excited enough to purchase this book. So without audience, if you'd like to share, please share now before we move on a little further. Okay, Don, seems like they're going to wait on us. Now listen, and I promise you I won't ask you a bunch of these, but on page 41, Don, in that first paragraph, I wanted to tie this in with you talking about those turn rows and sunflowers, etc., where here you say, whether I was 2 or 5 years old, or how many times Boss Lady and I shared those joyful encounters, I can't say. But I do know when my pain began, it was the day Mama and I were leaving the first prominent White House beside Brown Road. We walked on the turn row made by a whip-scared plowman. I said, Mama. Boss Lady said, I couldn't sit on her lap no more. We could not make alphabets and numbers in color and coloring books. She isn't going to read to me either. I asked her, why was this? Now, obviously, it's you are telling us what you thought, but being a boy, how do you think, can you share with us what you were processing at that time, as you were asking your mother why the, I guess what I'm really trying to ask is why did the stream change course all of a sudden?
I'm processing pain, and I still feel that pain from that experience of how the relationship with the lady that I call the boss lady. That was the lady as whom my mom worked for, cleaned her house at different times, and she would carry me with her. And this story is in the book, so I won't bore you with that. But she reacted to me as a little boy that she wanted to teach and wanted to tutor in a way that that little boy would become more familiar with living life, of learning, especially the alphabets and the numbers and the colors and these kinds of things. And she, like my mother, read to me constantly. And that went on over a long period of time. And I don't really know how long it was, as I sat there. And they were joyful moments between the two of us. Then I must have been probably 4, I'm not sure, 4 or 5. She said those very hurtful words to me, and those very hurtful words to me were, she wasn't going to read anymore to me, and I couldn't sit on her lap. And as a little boy, disappointed, I asked her why. And she told me because she was a white woman and I wasn't nothing but a colored boy. And that was the end of that relationship as I described it there. That's the pain. Now, I'm reacting in what I'm trying to write here as a boy hurt by someone he loves and someone that has shown him endless flurry of love over a period of time, and now it abruptly ends, and I hear these hurtful words, and I don't understand it. So I'm the one that feels the guilt. I had to have done something to cause this. That's what I'm wrestling with. But this is much greater, because this does not leave the pages of this book to the end of this book, because this again becomes like the night blindness. It becomes part of the world that I'm in, and how do I deal with it? And yet at the same time, she was helping me to embrace this, and also continuing to help me to overcome that. But I didn't realize that at the time. So that's what's bottled up in all of this.
Very interesting. Our guest, any comments, questions?
Well, Melvin, Mayor Smith from Marion, when I read that section of the book,
Okay.
I thought about that. I gave it some thought, and I could just, I could only imagine how devastating that would have to be. That it was like you had had a death in your family, you know, like you had lost a loved one, you know, that the hurt and the not understanding and no explanation, and yet it was a loss, you know, like a family member. So I can just only imagine the devastation that Don felt at that point.
Wow. Anyone else? And we'll be coming to a close in we have about 10 more minutes done. You know, if we, wow, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Mayor. That was, wow, that's powerful. And I know we'll discuss this in more detail. Now, Don, on page 53, you said something, excuse me, that a lot of people, regardless of race, creed, or color, may not have been exposed to. So I'd like to just kind of read a little bit of that and kind of get your reaction of the impact that have. And the reason I want to do that is because, as I said, I have a lot of young audience members, and we really need people to understand the breadth of how we are affected and what actually affect us. Because, you know, everybody try to tell you your story and you know, the universal you. So, and since we have the authenticator here in Dunston County, we'd like you to express. So let me just share this little bit here with you on page 53, beginning that first paragraph. It says, I came to know many years later, the place was called 5 Points. 5 Points, Black men were the invisible, the oppressed, the disenfranchised, the powerless in America. They were the invisible who rose early to weary under the hot Louisiana Delta sun from can to can for little or no gain. The invisible gathered weekly at 5 Points. Each were their own escape to freedom. If not long, all coincidental gatherings of freedom were for the healing of wounded brothers. Grievers grieved with the grieving. Complainers complained to the grumbling, and the joyful rejoiced in common celebrations. Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Yes. Picture me again about 5 years old, and also picture men having had similar traumas in their life growing up. Now they are grown men, and they came together in places like 5 Point in Monroe, Louisiana, and they were actually there themselves. And that sight is burned into my mind. Seeing it for the very first time in my life, all of those men standing around there. And growing up in Monroe, I learned more and more about that area and why those men were there. That came out of a lot of mind searching. And I could not have written that in the way that I did it, minus the travels that I did after I left Monroe. I saw a good part of the world and had seen, I've been in all of the states within the continental United States with the exception of 9. And I saw this same pattern all over this country. And so metaphorically, what I use here is the art form, the theater part of it, the opera, if you will, where the actors are on stage and they are acting out the various scenes. And though everybody sees them physically walking along or driving along that area along Desert Street between 5th Street all the way down to, say, 22nd. They were bunched in those masses in that one block from 5th Street to 6th Street. But when I was in Los Angeles, I saw that. When I was in New Orleans, I saw that. When I was in Harlem, I saw that. In Chicago, I saw that. All of these different places. Then it occurred to me, who else sees these men and how do they see them? As rebel risers, as a bunch of bums, are good for nothing, wasting their time, their money, and their talents all in this area, but they're crying to be seen because they are invisible. That invisibleness goes again to the night blindness. In the night hours, everything is invisible to me because I can't see it. And the lives of these men and people all over this country, they are invisible to the dominant society during that time, and much also even during our time. And the invisible are crying out, searching for a visible life form. And the incredible part of this is how history is so easily glossed over. We cherish the Boston Tea Party. Well, the Boston Tea Party was nothing but a 5-point. Those British subjects were being taxed in a way for everything, drained of their time, their talents, their energy, and the king and his subjects were the benefactors of it, and to the lesser degree to all of those that protested, and eventually the American Revolutionary War grew out of that. And hence we have this great republic that we call the United States of America today.
Wow. Comments, questions, audience, comments, questions.
I had something. It's not about, it kind of goes back to something that he touched on earlier when he talked about he was a little boy and how that affected him so when I don't know if you want to call it the boss, I guess I'll say the boss lady at that time told him that she could no longer help him the way she was helping him because of who she was and because of who he was. And it makes me just think something I've been talking to a lot of people about. My undergrad is psychology and I have a love for it. And one of the reasons I have a love for it is because there are so many things that are affecting us and so many things that are driving our lives that happened way back in our childhood. So for Reverend Wills to still think a lot of that and to still think so much of it to put it in his book, and it's just a message to me and to others that there are things that we need to deal with that was from our childhood that we need to have conversations about and deal with it so that we can live a better life. Just deal with it and have an understanding. So that's just something that stood out to me.
Yes.
Anyone
Yes.
else?
Just an observation. Such a fascinating description of 5 points and how you've encountered that around the world in all your travels, and yet your paintings and the work you do are beautiful, and so you see the good in life, you see the beauty of the world, you see the beauty of life, and yet you understand and know there's this side of life that exists, and but you choose to exhibit the beauty.
Yeah.
Just an observation.
Very good observation.
Yeah, the once Barry, when I was trying to find a gallery in Los Angeles to represent my work, and was turned down by gallery after gallery. And I came up on a place that was called the Outdoor Gallery. And this gentleman looked like a British subject back in the 17th century with the goatee and the long hair. And his name was Walter Riley. And I walked onto that lot and he greeted me and looked at my work and accepted some of my work on commission. But the words that Walter said to me that day, I have never forgotten. Walter told me to paint beautiful. Now, when Walter said that, I'm thinking beautiful in the sense of roses and the scenic and beautiful people. That's what I'm thinking. I mean, visually beautiful. But the words rode me, and they still are part of me. And in time, I began to comprehend what Walter was saying to me. He wasn't saying paint beautiful roses. Walter was saying paint the beauty that's around us, the people, the love, the family, the compassion, and the joy. And all of these things, that's what you paint. I do endless number of subjects, but I only do landscapes, I only do still lifes when I'm thinking of persons. So they are greater than just landscapes or still lifes. This is a personality or groups of persons coming together. And it's the beauty of that moment of friends coming together. What's more beautiful than for friends to come together and share that moment?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Okay, guys, Doc, it's about time for us to start wrapping this up, and I will ask you, please, and I guess if you'll there, and I want my audience to understand that this is not even a third of the book, guys. You're going to be in for a treat, and you really need to get Time Was Not My Burden. This is a treat, as you can see, from Don Cincone himself. However, I'm going to ask Don Cincone. There were two more to me, very, very deep pieces that you put in here early on in the book when you were talking about the Mystic Shack, and you talked about your uncle. Will you share both of those incidences, please, with our audience? As
Restate that again, please, Brother Laws.
the Mystic Shack, the Mystic Shack, and also there's a piece about your uncle when you were had made some decisions that you told me in the book you talk about you should not have made, and you needed some solace, and you look and you saw an uncle that your mom had to explain to you that was no longer physically on this earth, and you talk about the Mystic Shack as well, and one incident when you were picking blackberries with another uncle.
Yes. The incident that you're referring to, again, I'm a little boy. And this is my Uncle Reese. And Reese was probably 5 or 6 years older than me. My dad had, I think, 6 brothers, and everybody thought they were my brothers growing up. And so it's springtime, we go to pick blackberries in the woods. And Reese wanted me to pick just with him. He's gonna find this spot, and he found it. And it was beautiful berries here, and we worked our way into the midst of it. Under those berry vines was this small shack, and we couldn't believe it when we saw it. And we finally went back in there and looked through the window and saw the interior of it. And a conversation ensued between the two of us about who had been there and what were they like. And I described this in great details in this section. And when we came back out and went back to where the rest of the Wills were picking berries, and Reese told them about this. I didn't do much talking in those days. And so they agreed to go back and see this shack. And when we got back to that place, you could see where we had made trails into these blackberry vines, but there was no shack there, no shack. And of course they laughed at us, and we half-heartedly laughed with them, hurting inside. But the shack was not there. And I described this shack in great details of what we saw. And we talked about it afterwards. The other event that you speak of, my first school was a one-room schoolhouse with 7 grades and 2 teachers. And I was 2nd grade at this time and could walk home without the gang that I usually walked with. But I'm walking home alone down the road, and this road, the Brown Road, is a real road. It's there right now between Highway 15 and Louisiana 132 east and west. There was a low water bridge that crossed the road, and I looked and saw this figure of a man in a black suit, and on the left side, and I got a little closer, and I realized in my mind, I'm thinking in my mind that it's Uncle Alp. And Uncle Alp was a very kind-hearted man. He kept hard candy in his pocket, and he would always give it to kids. So I felt really good approaching him. And when I got even with Uncle Alp, I spoke to him, looked up in his face. He didn't say a word. And I walked on because you didn't question the actions of adults and especially elderly men. And when I got a distance away from him, I looked back probably 50 feet or so. He wasn't there. And Uncle Alp was too old to run, number one, and there was nowhere for him to go if he did run. I could have only ran on the road, and he certainly could have only done the same thing. And when I got home, and my mom came in out of the cotton field, and I told her that I saw Uncle Alp and spoke to him, but he didn't speak to me. And Mama questioned, was I sure? And I said, yes. Then she told me that Uncle Alp had been dead for some times. And then she said to me, you must have seen an angel.
That's right.
Now, that would be the end of that, but that has not ended in my life. That kind of strange happenings like that and many other interesting things are still very much a part of my life.
Wow, that's very interesting and very powerful. Yeah, I definitely want you to talk about Uncle App and the incident with the blackberry tree about the shack. So, ladies and gentlemen, if any other comments that you might have or any other words you'd like to share before we close our program for tonight, please feel free to do so.
Melvin, I'd just like to say, this is Mayor Smith again. I'd just like to say that the day that Don and his friend and our friend Tripp came and visited with me and brought his book that I had bought and purchased from him. I told Don that I would start reading the book that day, and I did. And I finished the book within a week. But, you know, some people say they like to read a book, they can't put it down. Well, I'm the opposite. I like to read. It's not that I'm not interested. I was very engaged, but I wanted to read it and enjoy it and make it last. So what I'm saying is it was a wonderful read for me. Gave me a lot of insight. It confirmed and validated a lot of things that I had thought, and it was just something that was very special, and something that really glad that I had a chance to to read and be a part of. I highly recommend the book to anyone.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm just going to echo the mayor's comments. It is very engaging and very eye-opening and very heartfelt, and encourage anyone and everyone to read it.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Brother Benjamin, glad you could join us. We're just about to wrap this thing up. Anything you'd like to share with us briefly before we wrap this up?
Thank you for having me, and forgive me for not being here for the full effort, but I would be remiss if I didn't just pop in just to support this amazing artist. I was introduced to Don Cincone this year, and I have been amazed by his works and what he's doing, and his memoirs is amazing. And it's amazing to represent such great talent. I don't know if he shared with you the fact that I am on board as a manager with him and actually helping to market his material. And I feel like it's very important to be a part of elevating this, I don't want to say rising, because he's a star. He is a star, he's a beacon of light. And when I was introduced to him, without a doubt, it was just a part of, I just knew I had to be involved. And not only that, but I needed to be able to share him with the world again, even though I know he is world renowned, but to share him with the world again and actually just make him continue being the gem that he is to the art world and to the world in general. So definitely it is my pleasure to just come here and support him and just be in his corner and represent him on all levels of marketing and anything that he's looking to do.
Oh, fantastic. Anyone else? Any closing statements? I'm sorry, Don, you were speaking?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Benjamin there. Good to see you, man. Appreciate it.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah.
I want to reiterate again before you guys do that, is simply the fact that didn't even scratch the surface, guys. We just did a few little things just to kind of give you an intro to Don Cincone, to let you know his works, to allow you the opportunity to meet with this great gentleman. And if you have not watched the movie, The Art of Love, we're not saying go and watch the entire movie, but we would like you to look at the paintings that are there and the drawings that are there. You will not see Don Cinconi's name, but those paintings and those drawings were done by none other than Don Cinconi. And we thank you guys for being here. And as always, you know, the Nobody Asked Me Guy show is that we just do it. We don't waste people's time with cookie cutter questions. We allow our guests to do what they feel they need to do. So, Don, I'll come back to you again, my brother. If you share with them how they may get this book, or would
Tell them how to get the book.
Go to Felicia Spears 68 at yahoo.com. Send me an email, and I will send you an invoice, and it'll take care of everything. Just Felicia Spears 68 at yahoo.com.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, guys, you got that. Felicia Spears, FELICIA SPEARS 68 at yahoo.com. And we also want you guys to go to that website and check all the things out with Don Cinconi. Just type in Don Cinconi. Mr. Stevens, would you like to share with us
It's been a year and a half ago. Yeah, we have over 40 interviews with Don on our YouTube channel. So you can go to our webpage, needlearts.org, and get there through that. Great time working with Don on that project.
Yes, that was a fun time.
It was.
And Brother Mayor, allow me to, maybe, I hope I don't put you on the spot, but Don was sharing with me that there is a connection, and there is a living arrangement connection that kind of tie you two together. Would one of you like to elaborate on that before we go?
The first time I saw Don was in Farmerville. That's about, well, it is 13 miles from where I live in Union Parish, Louisiana. You know, we're north of Monroe about 30 miles. But anyway, I saw him. It was a art exhibit at a new museum, and it's taking off, and it's a wonderful thing for our parish and surrounding area. But Don was there with his paintings, and the second that I sat down, my wife and I listened, and before I even spoke to Don, I felt like that there was a connection. I listened to him, how I could tell that he chose his words very carefully, and he spoke from his heart and from experience, and he was very, articulate about what he said, and yet there was humor in it to me. I watched. But anyway, the bottom line is I felt a connection then. And I made sure I spoke to him. I made sure I spoke to his wife, Betty. And so it's one of those things, it's a God thing. It's what I think.
Fantastic. We appreciate that. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. I'm your host, Melvin Casey Lars, and as we share with you, this is not a show. This is a memoir tonight. Now, but tomorrow night, there's a gentleman sitting on this platform by the name of Mr. Benjamin Smith. And if you are like me, you love The Lion King. He was one of the co-producers of The Lion King. And he also have another, what I want him to tell you about this, Mr. Benjamin Smith, because I want them to come back tomorrow night, 7 p.m. and hear you, sir.
Just a little correction. I'm not a co-producer of The Lion King. What I did, I had several students. We had 7 years of students who played Simba and Nala's in The Lion King. I am an off-Broadway producer. I have a couple of shows. We're going to talk about all that tomorrow. We're working on something so amazing. My team, my artistic director, Leona Michelle, and I don't think I mentioned everything, but I'll just say Mandela the Musical, also opening in London 2022. So we can talk about that as tomorrow as well. But definitely there's so many irons in the fire, and we're so excited to be a part of all the productions of theater, and definitely and so proud and so amazed and so floored to support Don Ciccone. That's like it's amazing project for me.
Well, thank you for that. So guys, that's it. We're happy again that you're here. Come back tomorrow night, 7:00 p.m. Look on my webpage, look on my Facebook. You guys know where to find me, and you will see the link there to come back tomorrow night to Gentleman Smith. So gentlemen, specifically Don Ciccone, it's been great. We appreciate you so very much. We appreciate our mayor.
Northeast Louisiana Arts Council.
Arts Council. Senior moment, sir. Senior moment. So guys, listen, it's been great being here. I want to bid each one of you adieu.
Say that it's definitely important to read history, and also important to see art. And when you have them both together, it's an amazing journey. Time was not my burden. Definitely a must read. And we're going to see what we can do to make it a New York Times read. So definitely that's our goal. And
wow.
that's what I do. So I'm glad to be a part of this team, and time is not our burden, but New York Times will be.
Fantastic. As an old friend of mine say, enough said. So ladies and gentlemen, it's been Nobody Asked Me Guys show. Have a great night. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate each and every one of you. Go now and have a great, blessed night and finish reading that book. Time is not our burden. Good night.
Thank you.
Same to you, Melvin.
Good night.
Bye.